Yo, Foolio's killers may have just leaked a message that might change the entire story of what we already knew. You won't believe this raw, chilling, and unfiltered message that just leaked from behind bars.
I'm finding that there is a substantial probability that all three defendants committed the dangerous crimes that they are charged with.
One of Foolio's alleged killers, tucked behind steel bars, picked up a contraband phone like it was a mic and hit record. What came next wasn't a confession. It was a cold, calculated threat that shook even the most battle-hardened detectives. We don't fear death. No remorse, no hesitation. Just raw menace, delivered with the calm of a man ordering lunch instead of mocking a murder.
So she's already spoke to them and confirmed, oh yeah, we were here.
Within hours, that audio leaked. Like gasoline on fire, it tore through Jacksonville's streets. Viral, volatile, and vowing this ain't over. When Charles Jones, or as the streets knew him, Foolio, was ambushed in that Tampa parking lot, many thought it was the final note in a long, violent melody. But no, that shot wasn't the end. It was just the hook to the next verse in a deadly track that's been looping for years. That message? It wasn't just defiance, it was a war cry. A promise that prison walls can't mute beef that runs blood deep. And as that chilling audio plays on loop across social feeds, one thing's crystal. Foolio's death didn't bring closure. It lit the fuse for what's coming next. Chapter 1, from bottom to top. Before the headlines screamed his name, before the viral videos and the street anthems that had the whole South listening, Charles Jones was just another kid from Jacksonville trying to make it out. Born into a world where poverty and violence shook hands on every corner, young Foolio didn't have the luxury of innocence. The 6th block, that's where it all started, where little Charles learned that in the hood, you either pray or you pray, and sometimes even prayer ain't enough. What's crazy is how normal his childhood seemed at first. His mama worked doubles at the hospital, came home exhausted, but still made sure her kids ate. But the streets got a way of calling young brothers, especially when you're watching everybody around you struggle. By 13, Foolio was already moving different, hanging with the older cats who showed him how to turn nothing into something. The music thing happened by accident, real talk. One day his boy had a mic set up in the garage and Foolio just started spitting. Nothing special at first, just talking about what he saw every day. But something clicked. The way he could paint pictures with words turned the daily grind into poetry. It was different. His first track, Coming Up, dropped on SoundCloud in 2015, and the streets went crazy. Here was this young dude speaking their truth. No filter, no fake stuff. Check this out though. Success brought problems. Every view on YouTube meant more eyes on him, and not all of them friendly. The local buzz turned into citywide recognition, and with that came expectations. The hood wanted him to stay real, keep representing. The labels wanted him to tone it down, make it radio friendly. Foolio said nah to both and carved his own lane. His relationship with fans was something else. On Instagram Live at 3 a.m., he'd be chopping it up with supporters like they were family. Appreciate y'all riding with me, he'd say, and you could tell he meant it. Wasn't no industry fake love, this was genuine connection. Fans would DM him their problems and he'd actually respond. That's why when he dropped Crooks in 2017, it wasn't just Jacksonville showing love anymore. The whole Southeast was tuning in. But here's where it gets wild. The more successful he got, the more dangerous his life became. Moving his mama out the hood was priority one. But even with a new address, the old problems followed. Every show meant potential ambush. Every video shoot was a security risk. The money was good, yeah, but what's money when you can't even enjoy it without looking over your shoulder? His mama saw the change in him. In an interview with DJ Academics, she said, "My baby was trying to do right, but the streets wouldn't let him go." That's facts right there. Foolio was caught between two worlds, the music industry that wanted to profit off his pain and the streets that wouldn't let him leave. Neither side really cared about Charles Jones, the person. They just wanted Foolio, the image. The way he balanced family and street life was something to see. He'd post videos with his kids showing a softer side, then drop a track dissing his ops an hour later. His baby mothers dealt with death threats just for being associated with him. One of them, who goes by Maya Mills, went on No Jumper and broke it down. Dating someone in that life, you never know if they coming home. Every goodbye could be the last one. What people don't understand is how calculated Foolio was with his moves. This wasn't some reckless young dude just wilding out. He studied the game, watched how other rappers moved, learned from their mistakes. When the feds started sniffing around, he switched up his whole operation, started using coded language in songs, moving money through legitimate businesses, keeping his circle tight. The industry tried to box him in, calling him just another drill rapper. But Foolio was more than that. Songs like Feel It showed his range, talking about depression and loss in ways that had grown folks crying. Then he'd flip and drop When I See You, reminding everyone he was still with the action. That versatility is what separated him from the pack. Even when he could afford to leave permanently, he stayed close. "This city made me," he said in his last interview with Say Cheese TV. "I can't abandon my people just because I got a little money now." That loyalty was both his strength and his weakness. The same love for his city that inspired his music also kept him in danger. Social media became his diary and his downfall. Every post was analyzed by both fans and opes. He'd drop location pins, basically daring his enemies to pull up. It was reckless, yeah, but it was also marketing genius. Every controversial post meant more engagement, more streams, more money. The algorithm loved violence and Foolio fed it consistently. But beneath all the bravado, you could see the toll it was taking. In his music, between the disses and the flexing, there were moments of raw honesty. Lines about missing dead friends, about wanting to see his kids grow up, about being tired of the constant warfare. The Charles behind Foolio was crying for help, but the persona was too strong, the image too important to the brand. Chapter 2, Why They Wanted Him Gone. To understand why Foolio became Jacksonville's most wanted, you gotta understand the politics of the city. This wasn't just regular gang beef over corners and drug money. Nah, this was generational hatred, blood feuds that started when some of these dudes were in diapers. Foolio didn't create the war between ATK and KTA, but he became its most visible general. The beef's origins are murky, but most trace it back to 2015, 2016. What started as neighborhood tension escalated when bodies started dropping. Young dudes who grew up playing basketball together were now trying to kill each other, and social media poured gasoline on an already raging fire. Every diss, every post, every video became ammunition in a war fought both online and in the streets. What made Foolio a prime target was his mouth. This dude would say anything, diss anybody, dead or alive. When Youngeen Ace's brother and friends got killed in that 2018 shooting, most people showed respect for the dead. Not Foolio. He dropped Who I Smoke remix, basically dancing on their graves. That level of disrespect crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Here's what's wild though. Foolio and some of his biggest ops used to be cool. There's old tweets from 2014, 2015 showing love between dudes who'd later try to kill each other. But the streets got a way of turning love to hate quick. One wrong move, one perceived slight, and yesterday's friend becomes tomorrow's target. The intensity of the beef shocked even OGs who'd seen their share of violence. These young dudes weren't following any of the old codes. No passes for women and children, no neutral territory, no respect for funerals. It was total war. And Foolio was leading the charge for his side. His Instagram stories during this period were like military propaganda, showing his soldiers armed and ready. Law enforcement watched helplessly as the death toll mounted. In leaked documents, Jacksonville PD had Foolio listed as a high priority target, not for arrest, but for protection. They knew his life was in danger, tried to warn him multiple times, but Foolio wasn't trying to hear it. In his mind, police protection was worse than death. The streets would never respect a dude hiding behind badges. The disrespect reached new levels when Foolio started showing up at his enemies' grave sites. There's a video, probably still floating around somewhere, of him literally standing on an op's grave, smoking a blunt, laughing. That visual hit different. Mothers who'd lost sons, sisters who'd lost brothers, they saw that and wanted blood. The pain he caused with those stunts created enemies who wouldn't stop until he was gone. What people outside Jacksonville didn't understand was how small the city really is. These dudes couldn't avoid each other even if they wanted to. Same clubs, same studios, same streets. Every day brought potential conflict. Foolio moving through the city was like navigating a minefield. One wrong turn, one moment of lacking, and it could be over. The money made everything worse. When you're broke, beef might stay at fistfights and harsh words, but when you got cash for guns and shooters, when you can put prices on heads, the violence escalates. Foolio was getting show money, feature money, streaming money. That meant he could fund a war, and his ops knew it. Taking him out wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was strategic. His music became evidence of his involvement in various crimes. Prosecutors would literally quote his lyrics in court documents. When I See You contained specific details about shootings that only someone involved would know. But Foolio was smart, always careful to keep just enough ambiguity to avoid self-incrimination. Still, every track added to his enemy's motivation. The role of women in intensifying the beef can't be ignored. Foolio had a thing for getting with his ops girls, then broadcasting it. Nothing hurt a dude's pride more than seeing his ex with his biggest enemy. These relationships weren't about love, they were about humiliation. And in the streets, humiliation demands retaliation. What's crazy is how public opinion started shifting. At first, fans ate up the beef, the disses, the drama, but as bodies kept dropping, as mothers kept crying on the news, people started questioning whether the entertainment was worth the cost. Foolio didn't care though, he was too deep in it. The persona had taken over completely. The older heads in Jacksonville tried interventions. OGs who'd survived their own wars attempted to broker peace. There were secret meetings, attempts at treaties, but this new generation wasn't trying to hear it. They'd grown up on social media, where every slight was public, where backing down meant losing face to millions. The old ways of settling beef didn't apply anymore. By 2019-2020, Foolio had survived multiple attempts on his life. Each survival added to his legend, but also to his enemies' frustration. He'd post pictures from hospital beds, middle finger up, letting everyone know he was still breathing. That defiance, that refusal to be intimidated, it drove his ops crazy. How many times could one man cheat death? The pressure was mounting from all sides. His own team was getting picked off one by one. Close friends buried, others locked up. The circle was shrinking, trust becoming a luxury he couldn't afford. Foolio started moving different, more paranoid, more isolated. But in trying to protect himself, he became more vulnerable. When you can't trust anyone, you're essentially alone. Chapter 3, The Man Who Pulled the Trigger. Now let's talk about the dude who finally caught Foolio lacking. Before he became known as a killer, he was just another Jacksonville kid caught up in the cycle. Born in the early 2000s, raised by the streets when his pops got locked up on a 15-year bid, his mama tried her best, but what can one woman do against a whole system designed to swallow young black men? By 12, he was already deep in the streets, not by choice really, but by circumstance. When you're hungry and you see the older dudes eating, you follow their lead. He started small, serving hand to hand, learning the game from the bottom. The streets taught him loyalty first, everything else second. That loyalty would eventually lead him to murder. His connection to ATK came through family ties, cousins and uncles already affiliated, so his path was predetermined. The set became his family, gave him purpose, protection, and eventually a target for his rage. When KTA started dissing his dead homies, when Foolio made songs laughing at his friends' funerals, something broke inside him. Social media posts from back in the day show a different person. Regular kid stuff, basketball highlights, school events. But around 2018, 2019, the content changed. Guns started appearing. Threats became common. The transformation from child to killer documented in real time. The algorithm pushing his violent content, rewarding his descent into darkness. His first body allegedly came at 17. Word on the street is it was a KTA affiliate caught lacking at a gas station. No witnesses came forward, case went cold, but in the streets, everybody knew. That murder changed him, gave him stripes, made him someone to fear. But it also locked him into a path with only one destination. The beef with Foolio became personal when one of his closest friends got killed. Not just killed, but dissed in death by Foolio's music. Imagine hearing your dead homie's name in a song used as a punchline while his mama still crying herself to sleep. That pain transformed into purpose, and the purpose was simple. Foolio had to die. What's wild is how patient he was. This wasn't no hot-headed young dude moving reckless. He studied Foolio's patterns, learned his habits, waited for the perfect opportunity. Months of planning, watching, waiting. He knew one shot might be all he got, so it had to count. That kind of dedication to violence is chilling. The Tampa trip was supposed to be Foolio's escape from Jacksonville's pressure. A little vacation, some time to breathe. But the killer had eyes everywhere, people feeding him information. When word came that Foolio was in Tampa, moving comfortable, thinking he was safe, that's when they struck. The planning that went into that hit was military level precise. After the murder, while everybody else was panicking, he stayed calm. Witnesses said he walked away like nothing happened. No running, no panic, just another day's work in his mind. That level of coldness only comes from complete commitment to the cause. In his world, he hadn't committed a crime. He fulfilled an obligation. The arrest didn't faze him either. When they picked him up, he was ready. No resistance, no talking, just silence. His lawyer said he seemed at peace, like a weight had been lifted. He'd accomplished his mission, avenged his people. Whatever came next was just consequences, and he'd accepted those long before he pulled the trigger. Inside county jail, he became a celebrity. Other inmates showing respect, commissary staying full, letters of support pouring in. To the outside world, he was a killer. To his world, he was a hero who did what others only talked about. That validation reinforced his belief that he'd done right. The leaked jailhouse message showed his mindset hadn't changed. "We don't fear death," he said, and meant every word. The system thought they were punishing him, but he saw it as a badge of honor. Life in prison was just another sacrifice for the set, another price paid in the ongoing war. His only regret seemed to be that he couldn't do more. What's really crazy is his family's reaction. His mama, in an interview with First Coast News, said, "I lost my son the day his friend died. What they locked up was just his body." That's deep. She understood that the streets had claimed him long before the system did. The boy she raised was gone, replaced by a soldier in a war she never wanted him to fight. Young dudes in Jacksonville look at him different now. Some see a cautionary tale, others see inspiration. That's the tragedy of it all. His story isn't ending violence, it's perpetuating it. Kids who should be worried about school are studying his moves, trying to follow his path. The cycle continues, fed by each new tragedy. The prosecutor in his case called him a cold-blooded killer without remorse, but that's too simple. This was a young man shaped by circumstances, molded by loss, driven by a code that made sense in his world. Understanding doesn't mean excusing, but if we don't understand how these killers are created, we can't stop creating them. Chapter 4, The Aftermath and the Pursuit of Justice. When news broke that Foolio got hit in Tampa, Jacksonville went crazy. Social media was like a battlefield, with KTA supporters crying and ATK affiliates celebrating. The videos of the scene started circulating quick, showing the brutal reality of what street beef leads to. His mama got the call around 3 a.m., and folks say her screams woke up the whole block, and the immediate response from law enforcement was massive. Tampa PD locked down the scene, Jacksonville cops started mobilizing, and everybody knew this was just the beginning. They'd seen this movie before. One high-profile murder leads to retaliation, which leads to more retaliation, the cycle that never stops spinning. Foolio's family had to deal with grief in the public eye. His mama, Ms. Jones, posted on Facebook, "My baby gone, but they can't kill what he stood for." The comments section became another battlefield, with supporters sending condolences and haters celebrating. That's the sick reality of social media beef. Even death doesn't bring peace. His kids were the real victims, too young to understand why daddy wasn't coming home, old enough to feel the loss. His oldest son, only 8 years old, asked his grandma if daddy was killed because of his music. How do you answer that? How do you explain that their father's art and his death were inseparable? The music industry's response was predictable and disgusting. Within hours, Foolio's streams went through the roof. Labels started fighting over unreleased material. Everybody wanted to profit from his death. They posted RIP messages while calculating how much money they could make from posthumous releases. That's the game, though. Death sells better than life in hip-hop. But in the DA's office, they were building something different. The prosecutor assigned to the case, State Attorney Sarah Martinez, had a reputation for going hard on gang violence. She'd grown up in Jacksonville, lost her own cousin to street violence. This case became personal for her. "We're going to show that you can't just execute people in our streets," she said at a press conference. The investigation moved fast. They had surveillance footage, witness statements, digital evidence. The killer's mistake was thinking Tampa was far enough from Jacksonville to move sloppy. But in 2024, cameras are everywhere. Digital footprints are permanent. Within 72 hours, they had their suspects identified and warrants issued. When they arrested the shooter, the whole block came out to watch. Some crying, some cheering, everybody with their phones out recording. His mother collapsed when she saw him in cuffs. Another casualty of the war, the arrest video went viral, adding another chapter to the digital documentation of this tragedy. The trial was a circus from day one. Metal detectors at every entrance, cops everywhere, tension so thick you could cut it. Foolio's family on one side, the defendants on the other. Both sides lost sons to this war. Both sides convinced they were right. The prosecutor presented her case methodically, each piece of evidence building an undeniable picture. The defense tried to argue it was self-defense, that their client feared for his life. They brought up Foolio's history of violence, his threats on social media, tried to paint him as the aggressor, but the evidence was too strong. Surveillance footage showed clear premeditation. Witnesses testified to the planning. The jury didn't buy the self-defense angle. When the guilty verdict came down, the courtroom erupted. Foolio's mama broke down, but it wasn't celebration. "This don't bring my baby back," she said outside court. The defendant stood stone-faced, showing no emotion. His crew in the gallery threw up gang signs before security rushed them out. Even in defeat, they were defiant. The sentencing was harsh. Life without parole. The judge, Honorable William Thompson, didn't mince words. "You took a father from his children, a son from his mother, all for what? Street credibility? This has to stop." But everybody in that courtroom knew it wouldn't stop. This was just one chapter closing while others opened. That's when the jailhouse recording leaked. The killer, speaking from his cell, showed zero remorse. "We don't fear death," he said. "Foolio got what he deserved. This ain't over." He mentioned the prosecutor by name. talked about the judge's face during sentencing, made it clear that prison walls couldn't contain their movement. The recording went viral, adding fuel to an already raging fire. Community leaders tried to use the moment for change. Reverend Michael Brown organized peace walks, met with both sides' families, tried to broker understanding. "These are our children killing each other," he said at a rally. "When does it end?" But his words fell on deaf ears. The young dudes weren't trying to hear about peace when war was all they knew. The aftermath continues to ripple through Jacksonville. More bodies have dropped, more mothers have cried. Foolio's death didn't end anything, just added another chapter to a book written in blood. His music still plays at parties, his name still gets shouted in songs. Death made him immortal in the worst way possible. Chapter 5, the war that claimed a generation. The beef between ATK and KTA wasn't your typical gang rivalry. This was deeper than colors or corners. This was about blood, generational trauma playing out in real time. To understand why Foolio died, you gotta understand this war that's been destroying Jacksonville's young black men for years. ATK, Ace's top killers, formed around 2018 after Youngeen Ace lost 3 of his closest people in that infamous shooting. The pain from that loss transformed into purpose, and the purpose was revenge. Every member carried that grief, that anger, that need to make the other side feel what they felt. It wasn't just a gang, it was a brotherhood forged in tragedy. KTA, Kill Them All, emerged as a response. Led by Foolio, they represented the other side of Jacksonville's war. These weren't outsiders or invaders. These were kids from the same neighborhood, same schools, same struggle. What separated them was blood spilled and the need to spill more. The name itself, Kill Them All, tells you everything about their mindset. The original beef's origin is lost, and he said, she said. Some say it started over a female, others say drugs, but real talk, it doesn't matter anymore. Too many bodies done dropped, too many tears been shed. The original sin got buried under layers of retaliation, each death demanding another death, each funeral creating new soldiers for the war. What made this beef different was social media. Previous generations kept their wars in the streets, but ATK and KTA broadcasted everything. Every diss, every threat, every victory and loss played out for millions to see. Instagram Live became a battlefield, YouTube a war documentary in real time. The digital age transformed gang warfare into performance art. The music took everything to another level. When Youngeen Ace dropped Who I Smoke, it changed the game. Using a nursery rhyme beat to diss dead ops, that was different. The song went mega viral, millions of views, mainstream attention on a street beat. Foolio had to respond, and he did with tracks that matched the disrespect and raised it. The disrespect reached levels that shocked even hardened street dudes. These young boys were smoking dead ops in videos, literally rolling their enemies' names in blunts. They pull up to grave sites, pour liquor on tombstones while laughing. The ancestors turning in their graves, watching this new generation violate every code that used to exist. Young kids inherited this beef like a family curse. 13, 14-year-olds picking up guns because their big brother got killed, because their cousin got shot. The cycle feeding itself with fresh blood. Kids who should have been worried about school were studying their enemies' social media, learning faces, planning drills. The police tried everything, increased patrols, social media monitoring units, but how do you stop an ideology? How do you arrest an idea? Every time they locked someone up, 2 more youngins stepped up to fill the spot. The war had become bigger than any individual, a self-sustaining cycle of violence. The economic impact on Jacksonville's black communities was devastating. Businesses closing early or shutting down completely in war zones. Property values tanking in neighborhoods known for shootings. Young men who could have been productive citizens instead devoted their energy to destruction. All that talent, all that potential wasted on a war nobody could win. Women played a bigger role than people acknowledged. Baby mamas choosing sides, sisters seeking revenge, girlfriends carrying messages, and sometimes weapons. They weren't just victims, but active participants. Some of the most vicious social media disses came from women affiliated with each side. The war didn't discriminate by gender. Federal involvement escalated things further. When local cops couldn't stop the violence, they called in the big boys. FBI, ATF, DEA, all building cases. They used RICO statutes, conspiracy charges, anything to break up the groups. But locking up leaders just created power vacuums filled by younger, hungrier, more reckless soldiers. The music industry's role in perpetuating the beef can't be ignored. Labels loved the controversy, the drama drove streams. They'd encourage beef, fund diss tracks, profit from the pain. These executives sitting in offices far from Jacksonville, making millions off Black Death. The artists were pawns in a bigger game they didn't even understand. Mental health in this environment was non-existent. PTSD from witnessing murders, paranoia from constant threats, depression from losing loved ones, self-medication through drugs and alcohol only made things worse. These young men were walking trauma responses, untreated and unhealed, perpetuating cycles they were trapped in. The code of the streets evolved with the war. Old rules about not involving civilians went out the window. The definition of OPP expanded to include anyone associated with the other side. Girlfriend of an OPP, cousin of an op, the circle of potential targets grew until nobody was safe. What's really crazy is how normalized it became. Kids growing up in Jacksonville just accepted that certain areas were off limits, that certain names couldn't be mentioned, that death was always around the corner. This wasn't normal, but it became their normal. A whole generation raised in a war zone thinking that's just how life is. That leaked jailhouse message keeps playing in my mind. The killer's voice, cold and unrepentant, promising that Foolio's death wasn't the end, but just another chapter. "We don't fear death," he said, and listening to him, you believe it. These young dudes have accepted mortality in a way that's both powerful and tragic. Soldiers in a war nobody remembers starting, but everybody's committed to finishing. The aftermath of Foolio's death continues to ripple through Jacksonville. More bodies have dropped, more mothers have cried, more kids have picked up guns to avenge fathers they barely knew. The cycle that claimed Foolio continues claiming others, fed by the same mixture of poverty, pride, and pain that created him. His music still plays at memorials, his name still gets shouted in songs, his legacy living on in the violence he both perpetrated and fell victim to. His family struggles with their grief publicly and privately. His mama posts pictures of better times when Charles was just her baby boy before the streets claimed him. She wrote on Facebook last week, "I pray every night that my grandbabies don't follow their daddy's path. This streets don't love nobody." His children grow up watching YouTube videos to know their father, learning about him through music that documents his demons. The legal system continues its own cycle. The killer and his accomplices face life sentences, their own families now grieving losses to incarceration instead of death. The prosecutor, Sarah Martinez, told News4Jax, "We got justice for Charles Jones, but we need to address why young men are willing to throw their lives away for street reputation." But new cases pile up faster than old ones close. The war between ATK and KTA continuing with new soldiers. That jailhouse message wasn't just defiance, it was prophecy. The killer knew what we all know but don't want to admit. This doesn't end with one death or one conviction. The conditions that created Foolio and his killer remain unchanged. Poverty still grips Jacksonville's black neighborhoods. Opportunities remain scarce. The drug trade still offers the fastest route to money. And respect still comes from violence rather than achievement. The music industry continues profiting from the pain. New drill rappers emerge following Foolio's template, turning their trauma into content. Labels sign them knowing the controversy sells, the beef drives engagement. The authenticity that comes from really living this life can't be fake. They'll milk these young dudes for all they're worth, then move on to the next when the inevitable happens. Social media keeps the beef alive in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. Old videos resurface, new disses drop daily, the war playing out in comment sections and DMs. Digital immortality means Foolio's disses still sting, his enemies still respond. The conflict continues even after death. The internet doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, doesn't allow wounds to heal. But there's something else in that killer's message, something beyond the threats and bravado, a glimpse of the humanity behind the monster, the pain behind the pride. When he talks about doing what he had to do, you hear the weight of that obligation. These aren't dudes who chose violence freely, but were shaped by it from birth, molded by circumstances into weapons pointed at each other. The real tragedy of Foolio's story isn't just his death, but what it represents. A generation of young black men torn apart by conflicts they inherited, dying over disrespect in a world that disrespects them daily. Talented artists using their gifts to destroy rather than build because destruction is all they've known. Communities trapped in cycles of retaliation, where peace feels like betrayal of the dead. That leaked message will eventually fade from memory, replaced by new outrages, new tragedies, but its echo remains in every young dude who picks up a gun for respect, every mother who buries a son, every child who grows up without a father. The killer's words weren't just about Foolio or Jacksonville, they were about a system that creates killers then acts surprised when they kill. As this story wraps up, think about Charles Jones, the person behind Foolio, the kid who might have been anything if born elsewhere, raised different, given chances instead of charges, the talent wasted, the potential destroyed, the life cut short by a war he didn't start but couldn't escape. His story deserves telling not because he was perfect, but because he was human, flawed and complex, and ultimately tragic. The streets will keep spinning these stories, creating new Foolios and new killers to hunt them. The music will document it all, raw and real and painful. And somewhere, Another young dude is recording a message from behind bars promising that the war continues, that death isn't feared, that the cycle remains unbroken. Until we address the roots instead of just the branches, until we change the conditions that create these conflicts, the message will keep echoing through generations. Foolio's dead, his killer's locked, but the war that claimed them both marches on. That's the real message from that jailhouse recording. Not just defiance, but declaration that this thing is bigger than any individual. It's systemic, generational, and until we recognize that, we'll keep losing young dudes to a game where everybody loses eventually. The streets don't love nobody, and in the end, that might be the only truth that matters. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and click on the box to watch another video.